This video, I'm going to be talking about the best coverage shells in Madden and why they're the best and how you can use them in your game. I'm going to be doing starting off with this normal Y off close. I do believe this is probably the most difficult formation to defend right now in the game, but we can obviously move on to other ones. So we can do this out of really any defensive formation. I'm going to be doing it out of 1-4-6 because it's my preferred formation right now in the game. And the basic idea with these coverage shells is they're actually fairly simple and they really just build around the switch stick. So in the coaching adjustments, I turn auto flip off, auto alignment to base, option defense on conservative, and I put my hooks on 5. If you guys want to get my entire Vikings defensive ebook, it is in our school community. That link will be in the description down below. For just $10, you'll get access to everything over there, all of our offensive, defensive ebooks, everything for $10. So I did want to break down again, kind of this coverages, the three best in my opinion that I like, and I think that these can be applied literally to any formation in the game with subtle variation. So, the first coverage that we're going to go over is a basic cover 4 drop style defense. So, for the blitz here, all you're going to do is just pinch your D line, and then you're just going to get this guy to potentially loop through the gap right like that right there. Okay. But what makes this good is the fact that we have a very good switch stick setup here. So what we can do is we just inside quarter this safety on the right hand side, and we basically have a cover 4 drop defense here. If you want to quarter this guy, be my guest. I actually typically will leave him in a third in this example, and the reason why is just because it's a simpler setup. I actually like to mid read my user. This is going to do a really good job of defending like any kind of in route over the middle of the field. You could put him in a hook row if you want to, but in general, I'm kind of preferring the mid read right now. And essentially, the whole idea is if they're running, like let's say a Y sail play like this, how we would defend this play is we would basically switch stick onto this middle third and then lurk in the middle of the field, because they don't have anything over there in that threat. So you'll see kind of how this works, but here I can kind of carry this, then I can kind of switch stick here. And this is what cover 4 is. Cover 4 is essentially a switch sticking defense. Now, let's say they did a combination like this, for example. This is kind of the same idea, and I'll talk a little bit about the weaknesses of this shell and how you can kind of mitigate that. So again, if I'm kind of usering right in here and I see this play, what I can do is I can just switch stick to this outside third or outside quarter over there and be able to lurk the tight end. So it's basically just essentially using those deep blue zones. And I call this like kind of developing a grid system for Madden. If you think about it, cover 4 is really best against this right here. Like 4 streaks, cover 4 is going to do okay. And the reason why we start with the cover 4 is because we can easily switch out of cover 4. So the reason I like to see in here with my user is so that I can handle this tight end streak, because this is like the route that I think is really difficult to defend. Now, another thing you can do is you can use a seam flat over here on the right side. And I want you to watch how this seam flat will defend this throw that everybody else throws. You see right there, he can't really throw that. Now, you might be able to, and we'll actually cover it here. So what I'm trying to get is I could actually literally just leave this like this and leave these seam flats on the field and actually have potential for this to be pretty decent. Now, what they can do is they can check down the running back for about 5 yards. At the end of the day, that's not going to kill you. I would rather give that up than like the seam streak for 12, 15 yards, okay, personally. So if I'm in this shell like this, okay, now we come back here to the left side. So I'm using the right side. So that means I'm not using the left side, right? So if I'm not using the left side, you'll see here, kind of the same idea. Seam flat will carry it pretty good. Typically, though, if you live and die with these seam flats, eventually they'll kind of carve you up underneath. So the reason I'm saying that is because you need to kind of be prepared for that. So I'm going to use a hard flat in this case. And I want you to see that with mid-zone KO, now in the game, this throw right here is open, but it's not as open, to be honest, as it was before. And one of the easy ways to mitigate this is to just bring these safeties down just slightly. I don't bring them down too far, but I do bring them down slightly every now and then if I'm getting killed in the seams. And what you'll see here is, and I'll show you also how to stop this for sure, but I just want to show you here. So like this throw, right, that could be a KO more times than not. Now, the best way to counter that type of concept and really that type of passing is the second coverage shell that we utilize. So cover four is really good as a starter shell. It kind of limits the big play capabilities of most offenses, and you can switch stick onto the inside quarters or outside quarters based off of whoever's not on a streak. What typically happens in most concepts is you're going to have one player, maybe two players on a streak. So this is like this would be like a traditional passing concept that you would get, and this is going to kind of be the reason why this defense is going to be decent is because what I can do with this is I can read. I'm over here. Oh, they're not doing that. I can dive down. I can do that. So you see what I'm saying? I can use those quarters to be able to essentially adjust them in real time, kind of almost like a match concept to a degree. It's not exactly match coverage, but it's kind of a similar idea in terms of we're starting out with a cover four base, and then that cover four is going to kind of mold as the route combo or the pattern distribution develops. Now, the weakness of this, as I said, is, in my opinion, is actually ironically the middle of the field, and really the middle of the field in a lot of ways. So there's really two weaknesses, in my opinion. The first one is the seam streak. The second one is the seam throw. So, example, a lot of people are liking this right now. This idea, kind of Clef popularized this, but essentially, this little whip route is going to get in that area of the field. It's going to be hard to guard, and you're going to get hit with that a lot. Now, they can do that in a couple of different ways, which leads me to my second shell that I really like. So, the second shell that I really like is a cover three, essentially a cover two on one side and a cover three on the other side. A couple different ways to get to it. What I typically like to do though is I like to use the cover three side and let the cover two side sit. So we're going to set this up. So essentially you're going to have your user in a hook curl. We're going to shade our coverage underneath, and then we're going to middle third this safety on the right. We're going to deep half this safety on the left, and we're going to vert hook and cloud flat like this. Now, the beauty of this coverage is that seam streak throw that we can't use her because we're over here on the left is no longer really going to be a factor. You see that vert hook plays it, and then that guy's going right into a safety. It's a really hard throw to be able to make consistently. I don't think there's really a great way to be able to make that. So you're able to defend that seam streak, right? Now, the weakness, I think, of this shell is it's not as switch stickable. Like, you can still switch stick on it, but it's not as switch stickable. Just because you're really going to be switch sticking more on the vert hook than you would be on like a quarter zone or something. But anyway, let's say we get this combination here, which is really popular. What's the vulnerability here? Well, we could potentially get hit in the seam area of the field. One of the things you could do is man the tight end up, but in general, we're just going to use her here, kind of get in here, and then really kind of stay on this guy right here. Okay. So that's the second shell that I like. That's the second shell that I think is really valuable, is this kind of cover three cloud. Now, what the weaknesses are of the cover three cloud, in my opinion, is really the left side. The cover two sideline is a little tender. You have to kind of be aware of that. So if they know what they're doing, they can probably hit you on a cover two beater, which is where you could start to initiate this type of a concept where you're going to use an outside third on there instead of a deep half. That'll stop most of the outside threats. And then really the biggest thing here is, you're not going to be switch sticking on the safeties. You're going to be switch sticking onto the underneath defenders because you have more underneath defenders. So, like, let's say we got a concept like this corner route right here. I wouldn't want to switch stick onto the middle third, right? Because I don't know. They could be running a post backside. So what I would want to do here is I would want to switch stick on here and kind of play this with the outside third. All right. So just a little different strategy, a little different style of switch sticking, but really kind of accomplishes to a degree the same type of purpose. Now, the third coverage shell that I like is really just straight up Tampa 2 in a way, but you can really run it two different ways. So if you don't feel like they're running outside fades a lot, you could run two quarters like this. This is really good, especially for like compressed sets, like bunch, some of those kind of sets. You would do this, more likely to do this against those. But these quarters are really good because the quarters are going to kind of do a good job of not getting burned by a seam streak, whereas cover two with two deep halves, they can kind of get burned for a seam streak. Now, one of the things that I like to do is I like to actually use a quarter on one side and a deep half on the other side. And I typically will put the quarter on the side that my user's on, and because then I'll also put my user in a middle third. And so what'll happen is, let's say we got a combination like, let's say we got this right here. So what I would be able to do in terms of how I could switch stick this is I would be able to switch stick to the inside quarter and actually go run with the deep fade if I needed to in this case. So you're going to see how this plays out. But basically, I read it here, and you see we're just going to switch stick him here, and then we can kind of get off of him if we wanted to and go back underneath it and take the stuff underneath. So this is, again, you could do just literally straight cover two like this. These are the underneath zones pretty much. It's either a mid read or a deep blue on your user. And then the other part of it is, are you going to do a quarter or are you going to do a half on both safeties? That's kind of your decision. Again, against these like spread out formations like this, normal live close, I feel like I could pretty much get away with this shell right here. The biggest thing I got to worry about is the wheel on the left side. So there's some, different things like that. But what these vert hooks do, and these vert hooks I think are so valuable because they really limit the capability for them to throw these seam streaks off of the snap. And then from there, you want to kind of switch stick onto one of them. So you'll see how this kind of works again. So I'm here. All right, I'm going to switch stick onto this vert hook, and then I can go kind of rob the middle of the field, right? And we're not in terrible shape right there. Like, we're okay. So that's how this applies to normal Y off close. Now I'm going to show you kind of how this applies to some other formations that are really popular. The first one being a bunch nasty or a bunch style formation. So with the bunch formations here, if you think about it, it's a little easier because we're not really having a ton of, there's not, like, because this is three receivers to the right side and one receiver to the left side, and that receiver to the left side is not super, like, he can't really be, he's not really he is a seam streak threat, but he's not like a great seam streak threat. So what we can do here, and because there's nobody on the outside of him, we can kind of live and die in a couple different defenses. So again, first and foremost, we can just start out with a basic cover four, and this can just be the shell. And what we're really looking to do here, and I would bring these guys down a little bit, but I don't think you have to. But what we're really looking to do here is we're going to user this kind of right seam area, and then we're going to probably switch stick onto this left side quarter. If you think about bunch route combos in general, most of the time it's this backside guy is going to be on an in route, or he's going to be on a drag, or he's going to be on a speed out or a corner, right? Very rarely are you going to get double seam streaks, okay? Honestly. So, and if you do, let's just show you here. You see, that's not, like, you're fine. You're okay. Okay. And I don't know exactly why, but I just feel like for whatever reason against bunch formations and when it's only a solo receiver, I feel a lot better against the seam streak than if I have two receivers on a side. So you'll see here, this is one receiver. Again, you can technically throw that. It is what it is. But another thing that I like to do, though, against bunch, again, that straight cover four. So I typically run it like this. And I like to move this guy down just a little bit. I just think if you just move him down just a little bit, it really can make a big difference. I don't think you need to move him all the way down like the double safety stuff. But I do think if you just move him down just a little bit, and maybe even throw like a seam flat over here, you're going to be in a lot better shape. But one of the best shells to me against bunch is this cover four, because what I can do here is it gives me a lot of freedom to switch stick, right? It gives me a lot of freedom to switch stick. Now, the second best shell, to my opinion, and you really can run it two different ways, is you can run cover four. It's basically kind of that cover three cloud type of idea. So what we would do here is we would actually, because there's not a ton of great deep sideline threats to the left side, we could actually run a quarter. We could go back to kind of that cover two mentality and run the defense like this. This is actually a really good defense, in my opinion, against this formation. And if you wanted to, you could deep half this guy on the right, because you have this quarter on the left side that is, like if they run like a streak to the tight end, like this inside quarter will play this tight end late. As you see right there, he'll play him pretty easily. So this is kind of an element of what I like to do to defend bunch. I really am a big believer in the cloud flat on the bunch side this year. I think that that's very helpful for defending any kind of these formations. One of the combos you have to be prepared to stop now, thanks to Clef, is you have to be prepared to stop this kind of concept right here. Well, what we're able to do on this left side, and this is one of the reasons why I think this is just a really good defense for Bunch, and why Bunch is kind of struggling right now, is these vert hooks and these clouds are going to do really good. Now, on the left side, I don't know that you necessarily even need a cloud. You could go with a hard flat if you wanted to. But I would probably go ahead and just leave this cloud flat and make them just check it down to the tight end drag. And then, we could eventually get into this kind of defense, which this defense is that idea of that cover three cloud type of deal with the deep half. And essentially, what we're able to do against this is this vert hook. He's going to guard here, you're guard here, and you're able to handle most of what they want to do, right, from an offensive perspective. And so those are really the main two shells that I would use for Bunch. I do think there's value in this shell right here. I think has a ton of value against Bunch, because what you're able to do is you're able to kind of get this vert hook over here. So what then you're able to do with your user is, instead of having to come over here to the right side, you can kind of stay middle of the field. And then if you want to lurk here, you can, and you still have a good blitz threat as well. So that's another thing. Another way that I would user this, like if I was actually in this a specific alignment, I would get into something like this. I think this is actually a really good Bunch defense right here. And the reason why I like this is because what we're able to do is we're able to user that left side seam streak. So they can't throw a seam streak on either side. And then now what they're basically forced to do is try to threaten you deep on the sideline, where I can switch stick to that. What's really interesting is when you use this roll coverage, you just basically can switch stick to this half. So let me just show that one more time here. But again, if I was facing a combination like this, I might even man up the solo guy. I mean, there's a couple different ways you could play it. But if let's say I just, leave the mid read here, right? What I'm able to do is I'm able to lurk. Oh, I see issue. I switch on this quarter, and that middle third, as you see right there, is taking the tight end. So that's a way that you can kind of cover Bunch without actually having to have any crazy adjustments on your defense. It's really just those three coverages that you can kind of use based off situation and then down and distance. There's a third coverage for specifically for like a Bunch nasty if you're really worried about a corner route on both sides, but you also want to defend the flat well. One of the things I like to do is I will basically use those vert hooks. I'll use hard flats on the outside. And then this is a super adjusty, but basically we're going to essentially trust that these outside thirds can take away a corner route. Now, you might only want to do an outside third on one side. So if you're not too worried about a corner route on the left side, you might only want to do it like that. But you could kind of, this is a little bit, a very aggressive shell. And if they seam streak you, you've got to kind of use the seam streak. So, but it takes away the underneath throws really well. And then for the last coverage, or the last formation that I wanted to just briefly touch on here, is going to be the trips tight end flex. And this one is kind of very similar to normal Y off close in terms of how you want to defend it. Any kind of spread formation is very similar. So essentially what we're wanting to do here with this is we'll start them out in a cover 4. Now, where do I want my user to be? Typically, if I was defending this formation, I pretty much always prefer my user on the trip side. So I would want to be over in this area of the field. You could, leave the mid read here, put him on a hook curl. But basically, this is kind of the show that I would start you out in. And then what we're literally looking to do is, let's say they run like motion post. What we're able to do here is we're able to kind of use her here for a minute, switch stick onto this quarter, and actually take this post all the way across. And we just force them to check down to the slant. Now, very quickly from this, another thing that we would do is we would get into this roll coverage. And the way you want to roll your coverage against a formation like this is you want to roll the coverage over the top of the tight end. So we want to top the tight end. So we use a quarter. We're going to use a vert hook, and we're going to use a cloud flat. Now, if they do this motion out of trips tight end, where they motion this receiver on the right side, one of my favorite things to do is simply stay in this defense, and then you're just going to switch stick onto this flat and run him back, or you can switch stick onto the quarter and run him out there. Or another thing you could do, which I think is an underrated adjustment, is we could be in the same exact coverage that I just showed you, except the main difference now is we're going to cross man this guy onto the tight end to kind of neutralize the tight end. We're then going to outside third the safety cloud vert hook. So the vert hook is really helpful because he's going to kind of get him to the deep zone. You have him cross man, and I would probably switch stick really quickly here onto this middle third. So you'll see how kind of, if I read this play right, I'm going to switch stick to the middle third. And now, you're able to play pretty decent defense. Another way you could basically do this is the same exact thing, except you're just using a hook curl now. So it will look something like this. Just this outside third is going to take away that outside fade. That's the main reason why you use that. And then if I'm here, all I have to do, you see, I read the play. I'm going to switch to this middle third and just cut this tight end post like that. Okay? So that's the cover 4. That's the cover 3 roll coverage. And then the cover 2 coverage, another way that you can kind of get to it that I like is we're going to use this outside third. We're going to use a middle third, but we're not going to use a deep half on the left. So the reason we're using an outside third is because of the. And then if I was doing something like this, I would probably man this guy up to the circle receiver, because the only thing that can really threaten you is if they put him on a streak. But this right here is a really cool defense. And what I see a lot is a route combo like this out of trips tight end. And I like this one for this combo. So what we would basically do, how we would use this is we would try to get onto that middle third and kind of cut, or we could switch stick onto the vert hook. So the way that it would go is basically I read, oh, he's on a streak. Okay, I'm just going to bail onto this vert hook, and then I'm able to kind of work over the middle. So those are some of the ways that you can kind of use these same principles for trips. The biggest thing with trips, I think, is you kind of need this outside third to the left. If you leave a deep half, you are susceptible to that outside fade. So you kind of need to be worried about that a little bit. But I really, so that's why I use like this. And then again, I just man this guy up. Like if I just man up circle, they can't really throw in the seam really in any way, shape, or form. And then, then I can just basically switch stick onto the vert hook. And I really like having this coverage right here. I think this combination of a coverage is pretty decent. And honestly, I mean, even if you wanted to, you could kind of justify like putting this guy over here and actually using this vert hook if you wanted to. Or you could use this right here. A couple different ways to kind of get to it. Another thing that's kind of crazy, but it would work, is a cross man with your guy on a mid read. But you really want the mid read here. And I think this is pretty decent tripsy. And again, the biggest thing what are you susceptible to here? You're susceptible to this auto motion. So if you do get this auto motion here, you're just going to switch stick to the cloud and just carry it and take it away. So this is kind of my favorite way to play with different coverage shells against some of the best formations in the game. And if you guys want to check out our full defensive ebook out of the Minnesota Playbook, it is in our school community. You get everything by being a member for just $10. You get all of our college and Madden content, offensive, defensive ebook, everything over there. If you want to sign up, the link is in the description below.